Living on the edge, but we're all still living, much to the chagrin of some people. The New York Times, not normal for spitting out truth, seem to have, I don't know whether they took a truth pill this week, because this is the second piece of truth straight out of the horse's mouth, or straight out of the Jerusalem mouth, same thing. And in the report this week, it has expressed shock, oh my, at the decline in Americans' quality of life. No shit, Sherlock. Hello, McFly. It's been happening years. On a slide that has been documented, it says for over a decade in areas like education and healthcare, but which they nevertheless hinted that it was all Trump's fault. It's neither Trump's fault or the predecessors by and large, and this is what people don't get. Many of these people are corralled onto a dark path by the manipulators from behind the scenes. Now, I'm not saying the front people are in any way clean, but skullduggery runs deep in the corridors of power. And the report says the US world-leading self-image is totally unjustified, and that is correct. And they acknowledge that in the report, contrasting Washington's vaunted superpower status with its 28th place ranking in this year's Social Progress Index. Now, the index purports to measure quality of life based on metrics like health, education, safety, freedom, and environmental stewardship. The US has slipped 9 places since the 2011 launch of the index, which boasts a proprietary scientific formula that incorporates 50 metrics of well-being and claims to be inspired by Nobel-winning economists. Now, its advisory board is chaired by a Harvard Business School professor, Michael Porter, who lamented to the Times that it's like we're a developing country. We are no longer the country we like to think we are, he moaned, urging readers to take the bad news as a call to action. Except Harvard have the brass cheek to call anything out and point fingers away, as they and other known institutes and their policies and actions that dictate life here are a primary reason for the current mess. Not to mention how Harvard was also instrumental in starting the fake COVID BS as well. Just saying. Now, the index highlighted some of the worst results of the unprecedented income inequality that plagues the US, observing that while the country came out ahead of the rest of the world in quality of universities, it ranked 91st in terms of access to quality basic education. 91st. Now, the alleged quality in universities is only down to the part the clowns engage in, particularly the CIA and their myriad of rogue and black budget programs that are ran through all of America's universities, colleges, and schools, I might add. And the report says the average college student here is worse off than most westernized countries' students by far. The problem is, this country has bred stupidity and ignorance for 80 years. And it is a national crime and disaster that will take 3 generations to correct. We've been taught utter rubbish and lies since kindergarten right up to university. And then when your youth learning, which is more indoctrination than learning, is over, you are then fed a diet of utter retardedness by the mainstream media, who are the epitome of misinformation and their army of portal people bots. For those new, they are portal people because their crap that passes off as news is not from this world and makes little sense. In fact, I came up with a new name for these people who pass off as news. MOM, Ministry of Misinformation. Fitting. The report goes on. It's the same with healthcare. That's a misnomer in and of itself. At number 1 in medical technology, it dragged behind at 97 for access to quality healthcare, which echoes the findings of a Lancet paper published last week, which we covered in the show, that found that the gap between cost and quality of American healthcare was gargantuan. And yes, it is. And the third leading cause of death in America is medical malpractice. And yet, no one's addressing it. It's been the third leading cause for years, and no one has addressed it. The publication also shamed the US for failure to share political power amongst all citizens, and that's likely to be a sore spot for a country that boasts of bringing democracy to the nations it invades. Criticised also for its high homicide rate, as well as its low rate of internet connectivity and also sanitation in comparison to other advanced countries. Its 100 ranking for discrimination against minorities also comes as an added poke in the eye in the Black Lives Matter era. And the Times seems shocked. Not very perceptive, are they? That the US has apparently fallen behind significantly poorer countries like Estonia, the Czech Republic, Greece and Cyprus. And also mentioned, or marvelling, that American children, according to the index at least, are educated on the same level as Uzbek and Mongolian kids, who have no money, no education system. Perhaps the Times should listen more to this show then. We've been saying this for years, whilst they played let's dupe the American public and write agency-based scripts. And they, with the portal people, along with politicians, all seem to forget the one basis of and for politics is to discuss and formulate policies based for and by the people, not for clowns. The report goes on. Their parents, meanwhile, were said to be about as healthy as the average Chilean, Jordanian, or Albanian. And these rankings were calculated before the COVID-19 bullshit. And the outlet pointed out, hinting at a much greater decline was looming on the horizon. And the only other two nations to decline in the SPI rankings was Brazil and Hungary, which seemed to have little in common with the US other than that they were ruled by leaders with a marked aversion to globalism, who have been condemned as heavy-handed autocrats in the press. Typical media rhetoric again, pointing fingers at the request of their agency-based scriptwriters instead of thinking for themselves and their role in it. Because the media, the newspaper media, are just as responsible with their bullshit. America's the greatest at everything. We're not. Get over it. Now, the index major supporters include Microsoft and the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, while its strategic partners are management consultancy Deloitte and eBay millionaire Jeffrey Skoll, born too. All of those companies are run by fake Jewish people. Just saying. Now, had this been a balanced article by the New York Times, I'm grateful that they actually put some facts out. But had it been a balanced article, it would have attacked Harvard and the last list of people for their role in the destruction of America. But I digress. And the report goes on. It says, while the news is grim, it's not entirely earth-shattering for those who've been following the country's economic misfortunes. Well, clearly the New York Times hasn't. And the US has been in decline, especially relative to its developed world peers, for over a decade, even as the Times admits in its write-up. Wrong again, New York Times. This country has been in decline since 1871. Yes, you heard that right. 1871, which is the last time we had a real government. And the proper constitution. And it's time these jackasses wake up. It was a hostile takeover, and puppets like the New York Times were responsible for the current malaise, period. It's been in decline since 1871. It was escalated in 1913 with the Federal Reserve, also run by fake Jews. Just saying. They said, however, while they acknowledge Americans face structural problems that predate President Trump and that festered under the leaders of both parties, Trump is said to be the cause of the decline's acceleration. And it said many on social media are fixated on the Trump factor, though others acknowledge the president was less the problem than the symptom of it. But that whole article is why this country is in a mess. Riddled with finger-pointing, riddled with reaction-based statements, party politics, riddled with diversion and illusion, and riddled with problems and not one solution to be provided to fix it. And this is why THI comes up with solutions, because it seems most are in the mindset of the writer of this article, including politicians, and no one outside of this group and the trustee seems to have the wherewithal to come up with anything resembling a solution. For too long, people didn't see we had a problem. So if there's no problem, why would you need a solution? And that was the attitude. But Americans cannot carry on thinking we are the greatest. Where is the fucking proof to prove such statements? There is none. You can't fix a problem, of which is a major problem, if you don't recognise the problem to begin with. What are we actually great in? Bullshit? Fake news? There's no proof. None. It's all an illusion. Like the American dream, you have to be asleep to believe it. And we have to quit sleepwalking and wake up, accept reality. We are so far from the greatest, it's just not funny anymore. And let's all come together and fix this shit. The guy on the TV, the greatest 3 or 5 minutes piece, that was years ago. Nobody's paid any attention to it. The problem's only got worse. So, let's talk about solutions, shall we? We've done many on this show. I may combine them all into one show one day and put them all out as a reminder of the failure of the government towards its people. And it doesn't matter which party. Party is irrelevant. So this is a new common sense solution for the government. Oh my. Here he goes again, talking common sense. Let's explode some heads. And this ends the blackmail issues. It ends the retribution cycle. And if developed and administered correctly, can send us onto a more adult way of thinking and path. So what is the solution? Well, Q posted this week, treason for Brennan and Comey. The masses demand blood and or incarceration, which is understandable with our current thinking mode mindset. Outside of THI, that is. But if those two have committed treason, why haven't they been arrested yet? But what if there is an alternative? A move away from the mass finger-pointing and blame game. A move away from the endless hours of drivel spat out by the mainstream media on these topics. A move away from the illegal bar system-based lawyers who all rub their hands with glee with cases like this and go ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. Which we, the American public, have to pay for. So the background to this is several pronged. 1, our government is over-bloated. 2, it is too expensive. 3, many jobs need to go. 4, most in high-level government positions have done criminal acts. 5, all are blackmailing each other to keep criminal acts under wraps. 6, prisons are over-bloated. 7, adding many more to prisons creates more cost for the taxpayer. 8, drastically reducing government jobs in one go will in part crash the economy. 9, red tape rules adds more cost to the taxpayer. And 10, things need addressing in a better way for karma reduction. So how can this all be achieved with one solution? Well, if Comey and Brennan are guilty, then what are the solutions? They go to jail. But Part 6 and 7 states it's not cost effective, and where to put them is another issue. The first thing to do is create and sign an executive order allowing for all government and subsidiary groups connected to it a full disclaimer for full disclosure unless nefariously involved with children. This will allow many to come forward and speak up, and it will end the blackmailing culture and fear that pervades the corridors of power, including, and reliably informed, the President. Many want to speak up but live in fear of being exposed for their own shenanigans or role in it. Many of these people did not start out as bad guys, but the whole culture and setup of this group is designed to trap all who participate in it in any way possible. The purpose of which is so they have leverage over you. And then they have you to do their bidding and work for them, or face being outed, or in some cases murdered along with the family. That's how those circles work. The Kennedy family is a prime example of this, although none of them are or were clean either. In fact, the whole family are Black Sun members. So how do we fix it? We create committees based on the criminal acts undertaken and place Comey and Brennan in that committee. So what is the purpose of the committee? Well, Brennan and Comey will have a safe environment to out all others who are involved in all levels of the criminality. All of them. You could have an espionage committee, a government contracts committee, a foreign contracts committee, and the list goes on. Each person arrested would join the relevant committee and out all of those they were involved in and with. The committees would end when the whole network is exposed, and some who did expose it can be employed after the investigations are completed in roles to prevent it ever happening again. They could be employed as oversight committee. So now they are employed to spook on the spooks. That is called poetic justice. This will eventually expose the whole network of criminals and the criminal acts, and will clean up all of our government departments that are rampant with corruption, fraud, dodgy contracts, and in some cases, terrorist leanings. They would not go to jail, which will be a relief for them and end some of the fear. But they would be working for the people to investigate and out all others in the network. If they hide something or fail to fully reveal things, then the jail threat of doing so should be a sufficient warning to them. So they would be employed by the government in these roles. They would have their salaries cut to a maximum of $75,000 per year. Their pensions will be drastically reduced, and not the government salary for life. In fact, the government salary for life deal needs to be removed from the table once and for all. All of these politicians have gained more than enough during their work time, not taking into account the kickbacks and brown envelopes they have received, to not require or warrant those expensive pensions paid for by the American people. Should they be earning $75,000 a year or more from other ventures, the committee salary would be reduced accordingly. If found their other income is due to criminality, take it off them and put it into an American fund to improve life here, preferably the People's Club, as it's our idea, and we already have the structure and ideas to take it forward. Their crimes are against the American people, and the American people should gain the benefits, not the criminals or the much maligned justice departments, where these people are fined and nobody knows where the fine money goes to. Well, we all really know in THI, but it doesn't go to the people, does it? What this does then is it drops them down the so-called class scale, No more expensive homes, cars and boats, etc., and more in line with the American people, which then has the effect to reduce the gap between the haves and the have-nots. 1 hour of their time is equal to 1 hour of everyone else's time. So why the disparity in earnings? It's not right, and it creates poverty and poor living conditions for too many. Now, some will say you can't expect us to live on a $75,000 a year salary. I will say you can if you quit the self-entitlement and greed-based game. Keeping up with the Joneses. You just lost that status for being a criminal. $75,000 a year is a goldmine to the vast majority of American families, and it all comes down to perspective and reality. Socialist lifestyles create mass poverty. Think and act different. Now, what this achieves is a step-down reduction of government employees. It will reduce the government bill drastically, which then reduces the taxes to the American people. It will end the fear and blackmail game currently that is holding the old control system together. It will garner a more transparent and fairer way of operating. It will end the repugnant secrecy games that are rampant throughout the corridors of power. It will end the Rothschilds and Black Sun groups. It will end the Dragon groups. It will end the lobbyists and terrorist-based lobbyists that are, in part, are responsible for the fear and blackmailing games, like AIPAC. The savings for the American public would be enormous. Plus, criminal monies can be added to an American People's Fund. Taxes would be slashed. Staged reduction of government workers from the current 23.8 million, when the government doesn't require anywhere near 24 million people to run the government, and that is a sheer waste of public funds. And why we're in debt. It would save on prison costs for these high-profile people. In fact, the salary maximum of $75,000 a year is less than the cost to house them in prison for most cases. So this is another saving. Is it not better that they are employed to clean up their own swamp and do something productive instead of rotting away in prisons at great cost to the people? This method also reduces the karmic gaining retribution culture, and it also allows for these people to work on themselves and in some way clear their own karma. And that benefits us all. When do we want this? Right now.